guest today is Nancy Mereska. No one can think about stopping polygamy in Canada without thinking of Nancy, a dynamic force for the freedom of women everywhere. Hello, Nancy.
Hello, Rebecca. It's good to be with you.
It's delightful to have you. Update us on what's going on in Canada.
The reference trial, which was the first ever in Canada where they sent the anti-polygamy law to trial to test its constitutionality, was declared constitutional. And we were very happy about it back in November 2011. But right now, Winston Blackmore is in court on trial for 3 weeks. The trial started on Monday for tax evasion.
I thought that was marvelous. I thought it was great.
Well, an elderly neighbor of mine, he's about 80 years old, told me that that's how they got Al Capone, was tax evasion. They couldn't get him on the racketeering charges, but they got him on tax evasion. And twice, Winston Blackmore, once in 1991 or 92, I believe it was 91, and then in 2009, has been charged with polygamy, and the charges have been dropped. But now that the law has been upheld as constitutional, I see in the future charges being laid about the practice of polygamy. I'm very optimistic.
I believe if they follow the money trail on polygamy in the United States as well, if they actually went after them with the IRS, they would fold it because they're a huge money-making organization on the labor and the backs of everyone else.
Well, also, I'm partway through, about halfway through reading Sam Brower's book. And although there are places where I question his research, he has listed on one page all the places where the FLDS have influence and make money, and one of them is Washington, D.C. So he hasn't listed exact entities, but I wish he had, because anyone reading the book then could follow the trail. And I don't know why he didn't list. If he's going to mention something like that, I think it should be listed. But my eyes just popped wide open when I saw Washington, D.C. I mean, they even have influence in Washington, D.C. in the way of getting grants, etc. If there's a grant out there to be had, somehow FLDS get it.
Well, it's because Warren Jeffs actually got Homeland Security money from Washington, D.C. It was, yes, that's been in the paper.
Well, that's news to me, because to tell you the truth, I got so sick of reading articles about Warren Jeffs, and here lately with his ads that have been printed in papers that wouldn't let legitimate Christian organizations print ads in their papers. I think that what he is doing should be stopped. He's in prison for life plus 20 years. I believe privileges like that should be taken away, and he's still spending thousands and thousands of dollars off the backs of all those people who live in poverty to support him.
Of course.
It's really a crime. It's really a crime.
Well, see, Winston Blackmore even has access to an airplane, and yet he says, well, we're all living on a commune thing. I shouldn't have to pay taxes. We all share this. I bet they don't all share his airplane.
No, I think it's only a four-seater. It was on a television program one time, and he was taxiing away in his plane. And they live very, very high, while the minions who sacrifice to support them and worship them live in horrible, deplorable conditions.
It was the same in Colorado City. Rulon Jeffs, Warren's father, would fly in there for Sunday services in his plane. And then they say, well, we don't have any money. We all live very, very poor and frugal, and it belongs to everybody. But nobody else was using his plane.
Well, I have all of the court records from the United Effort Plan. I put in an affidavit on behalf of people advocating here in Canada, and was fortunate enough to be sent all of those court documents. And the FLDS in Colorado City didn't have one plane; they had three.
Whoa.
Yes, three.
Well, no wonder nobody else used Ruland's plane.
It was,
They had their own.
it was his plane. So, yeah, I'm just amazed at how this cult works. And I won't call it a religion, even though they are recognized as a religion. I will not call it a religion because of the way that it works. The cult gang mentality in that religion is fierce.
Well, of course it is. Ruland Jeffs performed my marriage when I was a child bride. I know.
How old were you, Rebecca?
Well, technically, according to my birth certificate, I was 15, but my birth certificate's a forgery. All of my mother's children's birth certificates were a forgery. On my birth certificate, I didn't even have my mother's name. My father didn't want to have the children connected with him at all so that they could all be raised on welfare. And I don't know why he wanted my mother's children to have different last names. That seems so ridiculous to me and insulting to her. However, Nancy, in Utah, if a child is married at 15 with their parents' permission, it's legal. So the children had to be 15 to get married on their birth certificate. Even I know some girls were married at 9 and 11.
Ugh.
But the point being, if they weren't 15 on their birth certificate, then it could go into child molest laws. And I got to be really honest with you. I thought that when growing up, I never questioned it. But as I look back, I grew 2.5 inches after my first baby was born. Intimacy for me was horrible. It was traumatic. And so I got to be really honest with you. I have no idea.
Well, if you grew 2.5 inches, usually a girl's growth spurt is finished by the time she is 15, 16. So I am suspecting you were around 13, 14. That's what I'm suspecting.
Well, see, that's what I had been told. And to be honest with you, I can't remember the day I was born. I don't know. I've been severely chastised for ever saying that I could have been younger. But as I look back, I honestly believe I was, because there's too many things that don't make sense.
That word chastise, it just throws me for a loop, because they use the same word in mainstream Mormonism. So many of the trains of thought, many of the phrases that keep people in the peer pressure phrases are the same between the FLDS and the LDS. They are parallel, but they connect in so many different ways.
It's like a colloquialism that comes from the same part of the country, even in the manner in which we speak. The interesting thing that I find is that all of the cults from Canada to Mexico and now even into Nicaragua have the same modus operandi in their collecting of money, in their breeding women to have children that most of them are raised by government funds. Nancy, if they get out in the boonies and they incorporate and make a little town in the name of a church and it's incorporated, they are capable of getting government funds for post offices, for schools,
Exactly.
for roads.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have their wives on welfare because they're not legally married. Mm-hmm. And they put the boys to work in donating to the church and to God, mm-hmm. and traffic their daughters into other polygamous cults.
Right.
And they all do it.
Yes, they do.
And they all do it.
And whereas the regular membership are not allowed to be exposed to computers and to outside information, you cannot tell me that those leaders do not use computers and flash back pictures or videos of young girls to be married to the older men. It's just a given that that goes on. And we have here in Canada, and I was sent this list, and then I was asked by the lead RCMP constable investigating Bountiful, his name is Sergeant Terry Jacklin, to email the list to him because I had it posted on my blog. And I had both the redacted and unredacted list, and I changed and took the unredacted list off and left the redacted list on of the girls who have been married with Canadian connections, trafficked back and forth between Bountiful and the United States. The list is substantial, some 50 names. And they are now looking into that. They're investigating it, and we're just waiting for charges to be laid. That will be our victory. Our victory wasn't so much the fact that the law was declared constitutional, because, Rebecca, we knew in our hearts the law is constitutional. It's just that our victory will be when the charges are laid and men and women who have helped traffic their own daughters down to the States know they are living outside the law. And any woman who would take her 12-year-old to be married to Warren Jeffs and then hold the guardrails up of that horrible bed while he is viciously raping her daughter knows she's outside the law. There have been enough investigations into Bountiful, enough DNA samples taken, that these people are not ignorant of the fact that they are living outside the law.
They've always known that.
Well, I think it's especially egregious that given now how much more educated the outside people are around the Bountiful area and within Canada itself, I think it's egregious that more of these women do not leave with their children, that they do not say, I've had enough of this, I'm on welfare anyway, I'm going to go and make a life for myself and my children and move on. I think that they just need to know that the community support is there. And of course, I put on my blog my dream for a center to help these people. And I'm an activist with dreams and no money.
Nancy, please tell our listening audience some of your powerful connections since you have been involved in Canada's biggest court case in the country's entire history.
Well, I would say that my most powerful connections are those people on my campaign network who have stood behind me. People who have escaped the FLDS, to people who are writers, people who are members of the Order of Canada, people who are law professors, sociology professors, women's studies professors, people across seas, the international umbrella group, Women Living Under Muslim Laws, and of course I would be very remiss if I didn't mention the 4 pro bono lawyers from 2 different law groups, one a national law group in Canada and the other a law group in Vancouver, who took our interests pro bono, they haven't charged us a cent, to the reference case. But we were the only international group. I have doctors, lawyers. I cannot tell you how much in the now going on 9 years I've run this campaign. I appreciate all these people and all these groups and organizations. We are a network.
You have created that network, Nancy.
Well,
you've been the center, you've been the hub of the wagon wheel.
Well, it's been both a joy and a sacrifice because, of course, it's all volunteer. And at times my dear husband thought he had lost me back to the Mormons. And because we had been married, we were married in 1988, 3 years after I had gotten out of the Mormon church and the horrible Mormon marriage I was in. We were married in 88, and I found out in 2003 that indeed Mormon polygamy exists. I was shocked and dumbfounded. I was in a stew for a few days, and then I knew how to organize on my computer. But I called a sociology professor who ended up being one of our expert witnesses at the reference case. And I said to him, I'm going to start a campaign to stop polygamy in Canada. And there was a long pause. And he said, well, you can try.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I believe that if they start really looking into the money trail, they will realize that the situation is the same across the board with all of them. In Yearning for Zion Ranch, among the records, they found some 30 odd pages of underage marriages. And Texas was looking into that. And when they asked Mark Shurtleff, the Attorney General in Utah, if he was going to prosecute the Utah cases, he said, no, we have a statute of limitations in Utah of 3 years.
Well, that's where Canada really has the high road and the advantage over the United States, with each one of your states having different statutes of limitations. And this issue is addressed in Marcy Hamilton's book, Justice Denied, What America Must Do to Protect Its Children. We do not have a statute of limitations in Canada for child abuse, child sexual abuse. There is no statute of limitations. Like, I could come forward at the age of 65, and if the person who had abused me was still alive, I could say, this person abused me, I want them charged, I want them in court, I want to face my abuser, and it would happen.
Well, I find that very interesting because here in the United States, I was raised in the AUB. Cody Brown, star of Sister Wives TV alleged reality show, acknowledged to the world he was a member of the AUB, which is the same group, polygamous group, that I grew up in. And Cody and I have a same paternal great-grandfather, and 2 of his wives are also related to me. So I know it's not a reality show, but the point being, the AUB has put forth a lot of propaganda that they don't believe in child brides or underage marriages. They put that propaganda forth all my life. Yet, my mother's 3 daughters were all married, underage, and we were all raised in the AUB. My sister Irene was sent to the LeBaron cult in Mexico. Irma, my little sister, remained in the AUB, and I was married into the FLDS. All of us underage, and that is still going on because they have always professed that before the law. Mm-hmm. In other words, what I'm telling you is that underage marriages is part of their condoned religion, and they're going to tell the world the lies they've always told them because that's what they do.
Exactly. Also, whenever Winston Blackmore has been interviewed, he deflects the question. He always deflects the question. He will not answer a direct question. And even now, I haven't posted the latest 2 articles about his court trial up on my blog yet, but even now he's having trouble remembering. The Globe and Mail's headline was that he forgot his 22nd wife. Well, in Daphne Brahm's book, The Secret Lives of Saints, she is a reporter with an investigative reporter with the Vancouver Sun who has covered the polygamy issue since 2001. She lists or talks about 26 wives. And I heard her speak at a convention in Edmonton, and she said, I think I'll become his 27th wife, and everybody in the room chuckled, of course. But he is listing for the court 21 wives, and now it appears that there's 22, and he can't remember how many left at the split. And I could name one who left at the split, and that was Ruth Lane. She did a video testimony for the reference. I do agree with Sam Brower on two different people, his opinions of two different people, and that's Willie Jessup and Mark Shurtleff. He doesn't have much respect for either one, and neither do I. When Sam Brower talks in his book about how it was so sickening to see Willie Jessup suddenly become the media favorite when it came to the FLDS, and knowing what a thug, and that's the word he uses to describe Willie Jessup in the book, what a thug he really is. Well, I was sickened too, and I even wrote to my news group, why is Willie Jessup suddenly the media boy for the FLDS? He was a bodyguard for Jeffs. You can't tell me he didn't know what was going on. He was waiting for his turn. Willie Jessup and his brother, what's his brother's name? I forget. I think it's Lyle, the same as Warren's brother. But they were not the police in Colorado City, but they were the bullies. They went and made sure whatever the police or the judge decided should happen, happened.
Well, more than that, when Willie took over, when Warren Jeffs fled, he was the enforcer.
Mm-hmm.
Willie was not there as the spokesman. He was the enforcer, and everybody knows it.
Well, it even made me sick to see him on Larry King and on the other television shows. You know, he was having a heyday going around playing the good big boy when he was the bad big boy. So as far as I'm concerned, that's my opinion.
Well, isn't that the general position of all these polygamists that get out in the media? Look at Tom Green. He was a child molester. He married 4 of his own stepdaughters, his children. You know, underage kids. The youngest was 13 when the law got him, and according to John Llewellyn, she was 12. You know, look at him. Look at Cody Brown. There are so many of them that as soon as they can get in the limelight, that they're Mr. Hotshot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, look at the Darger family, love times 3. That's a sickening situation if I ever saw it.
And they acknowledge in that book that they've had to rely on welfare, as Joe acknowledges in that book. He says that his wives should take care of their own emotional and financial needs.
How can you be a responsible parent and have 24 children and expect them to be fully equipped and educated enough with the skills enough to go out in the regular world and to be able to have the skills to function? You can't. You can't. And in a day that we live in, where many young married couples and young people between the ages of 20 and 35 are being forced to go back home and live with their parents because of financial situations and because of not being able to get jobs. And it happens here in Canada as well. We cannot visit that on our children. We have to be responsible parents. And as far as I'm concerned, the Dargers, the Browns, the Jeffs, the whatever, are not responsible parents. They don't even pretend to want to be responsible parents.
Well, as far as Cody Brown's family is concerned, because they're on the Learning Channel, he is actually making a movie out of being with his family. The reality is that very few polygamous fathers are ever really with their children. They have too many children to even be a father to. Those children don't have a connection with their father.
Well, of course, it's fatherless societies. The terrible riots in South France in 2010 and the terrible riots in London last year were mainly because of fatherless societies. And it's Muslim polygamy that is the big problem over there. France didn't have, until in the last decade, any type of a rule about Muslim men immigrating and then bringing wife after wife after wife in. And the same thing in Great Britain. But in Great Britain, the problem over the years has been what they call trophy brides. Muslim men love, and I mean love, to get their hands on a blonde, English, or French woman, and these men have money. They are charming. Many of them are good looking, and they capture a trophy bride. And the trophy brides, many of them are not even aware that Muslims can marry, are permitted to marry up to 4 women. Mind you, the rule is supposed to be that they treat each one fairly. But these women don't even get to meet their in-laws, because if they were to go home to their husband's home country and meet their in-laws, they get spit on. They get spat upon, and they're treated horribly. Then the men put them in these shabby neighborhoods in apartments and show up once or twice a year, usually long enough to get them pregnant again. And the girls are stuck on welfare. Their children do not know their fathers. The same thing in France. And the next thing you know, you have huge groups of young people at the abject poverty line in society, who know that they do not have the money or the resources to get the education that they need. They form gangs and they become troublemakers. And this has been quite an issue in France and in Great Britain. And we saw on the news, I don't know if you did in the States as much as we did, because we're a Commonwealth nation, all the problems with those riots in London last year. It was terrible. And it's mainly fatherless societies. Children who do not know their fathers. And that's polygamist societies.
There's a recent article that was put out this week. The fact that research shows that polygamy increases crime.
Yes, that was Dr. I got that whole study posted on my blog. It's Dr. Joseph Henreich, and he was the key witness, or one of the key witnesses, for the Attorney General of British Columbia at the reference. Quite a charming young man. He's a genius. He's an absolute genius. I was sitting in the courtroom in the gallery, and this man was sitting 3 seats down from me, and I'd never seen him before, and I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, I'm Joe Henreich." And I, just, "You're him?"
Wonderful.
I had read his affidavit, and then I knew my group of lawyers hadn't met him, so I stood up, and Brian Samuels, the lead lawyer for our group, and I said, "Brian, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Dr. Joseph Henreich." And Brian shook his hand and shook his hand. And they started a conversation, and I just sat down, and what an honor to even meet him, because of all the research he has done on this issue.
And he is one of many. I have read other reports as well that have gone along the way through your blog and other places. When children grow up just being another number, they don't have the emotional security that they need. They don't have the self-confidence they need. And you think about a wife just being another number. How a child that their father may or may not remember their name. You think Willie can't remember his wives' names? What about his children?
Well, with Winston Blackmore, each child does have a number, and when they go up to greet him, father, which is what they call their parent, the men get father. Father, I'm number 87, and my name is so-and-so, And
Right.
Otherwise, he does not know his own children. And in the paper, it's saying over 100. Well, we know that he has over 130 children. And there were 40 children alone that he admitted to being born between 2006 and 2010. I have to reread the article, but how and why? And it is just so bad.
Doesn't Canada give a child allotment of money for every child?
In Canada, we have the child tax credit. And yes, the women get to claim this amount. And they get so much a month per child. And it used to be called the Family Allowance Check.
In the AUB on the web, in their own papers, Owen Allred declares that a woman in a celestial marriage should not be allowed to handle money.
Well, I could go on two tangents there on how I was not even given a personal allowance when I was in my Mormon marriage. I watched him give thousands of dollars to the Mormon church, but if I asked for money for even a pair of stockings, he would tell me to take it out of the grocery money, which wasn't that much either. And then also the other tangent is that women through the ages have been treated as second-class citizens. And why is it in 2012 now that we are still having to fight for our rights? And when I saw the situation and the attitude of Winston Blackmore on a show called The Bishop of Bountiful, when he talked about my ladies, as if they were his chattel, as if he owned them, this attitude has got to be dissolved in society. Women, no matter where, have got to be, shall I use the word allowed, given their personal dignity, their personal right to be equals with whomever they are aligned with.
Unfortunately, the women usually end up with the responsibility and the blame, and if they can take that, why can't they take the dignity and the praise?
Well, the reason they end up with the responsibility and the blame is they do everything, literally everything. And including, in my case, because my ex-husband was out of town a lot, I was the major disciplinarian. I had to decide, you know, what punishment was meted where for what infraction and to keep the family as a unit. And I was berated by my ex-husband in front of the children. But not only in Mormonism, but I talk with women at work, and they went through the same thing. You know, they'd either go home and find their husbands drinking beer and watching television, or doing absolutely nothing. And it's the mother does everything, mother gets blamed for everything syndrome that not only the Mormon culture, the FLDS culture, but broader society.
That's the point. We don't have equality. We don't even understand equality. The broad spectrum is that if they're another sex, another color, another religion from another country, we're better than they are. There's a real problem with that sick thinking, and it's very narcissistic.
Well, not only that, but going back to the dignity issue, President Barack Obama, in his State of the Union address on Tuesday evening, which I watched from stem to stern, talked about human dignity and how no citizen should be left behind. And I'm thinking all the time, what about the polygamous enclaves in America and the little that's being done about it? George Bush, that's the second George Bush, gave Utah $750,000. He gave Shurtleff and the governor at the time $750,000, $750,000 to fix the problem. What did Shurtleff do? He set up the safety net committee, and he did not allow anyone who was anti-polygamy a voice at the table. So that's what he did with the money. He held his polygamy summit. And I have from people who were there at the table at the first meeting, what he told them, that he would not allow anyone who was against polygamy to have a voice, speak at the meeting. So this is what he has done. And when he had his polygamy summit in 2003, he said, and Sam Brower failed to put this in his book, he said, "I will not prosecute a religious belief." Well, excuse me, Is a religious belief child abuse? Is a religious abuse sexual abuse? Is a religious belief taking concubine after concubine after concubine and underage concubines, which are totally against the law, and he's not about to prosecute them? And then he makes the excuse in one interview that he had that the problem is so big that Utah doesn't have the resources to take care of it. I'm not advocating another raid. We know how far those raids go. But I am advocating that they stop giving money for their schools, that they stop even allowing them homeschooling grants, knowing the twisted, sick curriculum that they use, and they do the same thing up here in Canada, that they stop allowing them tax breaks for a religion that is not a religion but a cult.
Nancy, are you telling us that if they stop funding organized crime, it might shrink?
I'm saying that exactly.
Senator Harry Reid called these polygamist cults organized crime, and they are. But organized crime will not stop until we stop funding it. As long as it pays, it will not stop.
Well, and it pays good. It pays good both in the United States and in Canada. We know that there are people trained in the FLDS that to find whatever grant is out there, they get that grant. And in Canada, we have the child tax credit that the women get. They can also go on welfare and keep having baby after baby after baby while they're on welfare. It pays. It pays. It pays. So many millions of dollars have been pumped into the independent schools, the Mormon Hill School, which is Winston Blackmore's group school, and the Bountiful Elementary Secondary School. It's pathetic, and yet they were allowed to have teachers who weren't even certified.
Yes.
It's pathetic. There are guidelines in place, and the people in charge of these guidelines do not follow through. The woman who is now the premier of British Columbia was the education minister when I first started my campaign, was writing letters and writing letters and writing letters to officials and politicians, whatnot. She was education minister. Christy Clark. Millions of dollars have been poured into the school system in Bountiful, both the Mormon Hill School, which is Winston Blackmore's group, and then also the Bountiful Elementary Secondary School, which is the Warren Jeffs faction FLDS group. And yet they were allowed to not even have teachers who were certified. And the graduation level is lower than anywhere else in Canada with that group. And they have so many thousands and thousands of dollars that they get either through welfare or the child tax credit. Now, I'm not sure if a woman is on welfare, I'm not sure if she still gets the child tax credit. She probably does. And yet they have baby after baby after baby while they're on welfare as parents. And the rules just don't seem to apply. Christy Clark, who is the premier of BC now, was the education minister when I first started my campaign. And I wrote letter out, and so did members of my network, wrote letter after letter after letter to her, because we had a researcher on the network who was gathering the facts and letting us know the financial facts and the teachers that were not certified, et cetera, et cetera. And we were ignored. Our letters were ignored. The only letter I ever wrote that got any type of attention, and it was some nasty media attention, because how dare this woman in Alberta write to the Attorney General, Jeff Plant, in British Columbia. I wrote an open letter to him, and I listed everything I knew at that point, and this was in 2004. And the CBC reporter The CBC is a national media here in Canada. It's the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, with a very nasty tone of voice, called me and said, "Did you write an open letter to Jeff Plant, the Attorney General of BC?" I said, "I certainly did." And I had put the letter out on my network, of course. And I said, "I want to know why nothing's being done about men with concubines and underage marriages and children not being allowed to have a proper education or the life skills to be able to function in the normal world. And I want to know why all the thousands and thousands of dollars are being pumped in to this community when nothing is coming out to show for it except slave labor and more women and young girls being taken as concubines." And he was not happy with me at all. You know, they would like, because Bountiful is tucked there in the mountains in southeastern BC, and you know, they would just like to turn a blind eye, or they wanted to at that time, turn a blind eye and pretend it didn't exist. And when I found out about the slave labor camps in Sundre, Alberta, I wrote to the man who was the Minister of Employment and Human Resources, or Labor and Human Resources in Alberta. At the time, his name was Clint Dunford. I wrote him a letter, and it took months for me to get a reply. And when I did get a reply, it was from an underling named Wallace Bayer, and he told me that since I could not pinpoint exactly where the labor camps were, there would be no investigation. And he gave other reasons, and he said one of my biggest complaints was that these children were not being paid, and they were living in horrid conditions. And he wrote that a man could pay a stipend to his son, and I called his office. I got his voicemail, of course, and I said, "What if a man has 50 sons?" Of course, he never phoned me back. But then when Alyssa Wall's book came out and Sundre was mentioned there, and also I couldn't get any media attention here in Alberta about it because it had not been documented. I said, "Well, I'm documenting it." But they wouldn't give me, because I'm a housewife, an activist, et cetera, they wouldn't give me any coverage on it. And one reporter from Calgary actually got quite upset with me because she went snooping to Sundre, and nobody there would open up to her. And there was a group of people there at one time who were lost boys were drifting into Sundre and into Red Deer, and lost boys were coming out of Bountiful into Sundre, or they were being kicked out in Sundre at the labor camps themselves. And there was a group of people there, very well-meaning, who took some of these boys in and helped them get their GEDs and get on their feet a little bit. But then the woman who was heading this committee lost her husband to a dreadful disease, and it kind of dissipated. And she also let me know that since she was the main breadwinner, and it was a small community and everybody knew everybody, that she didn't want any media contact at all. And I said, "Well, what if it's confidential?" And she finally just broke off altogether. She said, "I don't want any contact whatsoever," because she said she could lose her job. As a matter of fact, these people, the FLDS, were doing big business in Sundre. Hardware, equipment breakdown, groceries, you name it, supplies for building, you name it. And it's the same situation in Creston. There were women and men in Creston who started a committee years ago, oh heavens, 2 decades ago, I believe, called Altering Destiny Through Education. And they set up an underground where they, women and children who were escaping Bountiful, they would hide them, they would shop for them, they would move them on to communities where they could get help. 2 of the women who headed up the committee and still do, they're co-chairs, Audrey Vance and Linda Price, Linda Price told me that she went into a store one time and the proprietor came over to her and said, "Should you really be in here?"
Oh my goodness. Well, you know, all of these things you talk about that they wouldn't listen, since this case in Canada came up, they're sure listening now.
I'm very glad to hear that. But like I say, the victory for us will be when some of these people, men and women, are prosecuted for the crimes they have committed against children.
I think it's marvelous what's going on with Winston Blackmore. He said that a certain incident, 8 or 9 of his wives left. He couldn't seem to remember whether it was 8 or whether it was 9. He certainly has trouble with numbers when it comes to his women, doesn't he?
Well, what do they matter to him except to be breeding stock? I mean,
They don't.
really, what do they matter? I mean, that if these women are reading the newspaper articles, I hope that they realize just exactly how little they and their children meant to him. They were a source of income. He lost a wife this last summer who was a 6-figure salary woman who had given him 12 children. She left and took the 6 younger ones with her and married monogamously to a man. And the 6 older ones wanted to stay. And so she ended up just taking her 6 younger children. But she was a 6-figure salary woman because she was a nurse and a midwife. And she was bringing in the bucks to Mr. Blackmore. But he married a younger woman last summer, took another bride, and she got very upset and she left.
Well, good for her.
That's what I say. And I hope that she's upset enough that she will come forward and she will discuss the financial situation of Mr. Blackmore. Because all of the women, when they earn money, we know they give it to the leader.
Yes, and that includes all their government funds for the children.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why these guys can have their own planes, the best trucks. A fellow on the network who lives in Cranbrook has told me many times that he is amazed that any truck being driven by FLDS men, it is the top of the line, newest edition.
Well, of course. Look at the vehicles that Cody Brown drives. You know, he doesn't quit having babies, but he claims he has financial trouble.
But don't you know that's their calling in life, is to be super studs?
Cody, before he married Robin, he had a bankruptcy for each of his first 3 wives, 2 defunct businesses, and Christine Brown was drawing food stamps while they were filming on the Learning Channel.
Yes, I've read all about it. I am fighting for the rights of women in polygamy, in Mormon polygamy, and Muslim polygamy, and Christian fundamentalist polygamy, and African and Asian polygamy, and yes, for women's rights.
Well, see, Nancy, that's the point. That is the point. You are fighting for human rights, equal human rights.
Yeah.
You're not fighting for a theology or a philosophy. You're fighting for equal human rights.
Why is it that when an ex-Mormon woman dares to share her experiences, she is called bitter, especially by Mormon men?
Well, of course. Of course, if you don't come out smiling and saying, wow, that was nice, you should be sweet no matter what's done to you. Haven't you been told?
Yes, I'm supposed to be sweet. I have the remnants of a broken jaw. I took bruises to bishops, only to be told to go home and do things to make him love me. Well, if someone doesn't love you, they don't love you, period. And I don't know. I look back and people ask me, why did you hang on for so long? Well, I still had that Mormon dream in my head that if I endured to the end, everything was going to be okay. Well, then I realized before I finally got out of it, the only way I'm going to endure to the end is like so many people I have seen in my 20-year sojourn with Mormonism. I will take my life. My mind had come to a black space, and I thought, no, I want to survive. And I got out of it. I got out of it.
Well, see, Nancy, there's two problems involved with women that are getting government funds for their children and then being controlled by the men. It's hard to help them escape if we can't sever their connection with the men. The government's already paying them for their children. We've got to sever the control. The women are so afraid to get out from under the control. I personally have financed women out of polygamy to find out that after I supported them, home and all, for a few years, that they were still in polygamy and I was just the fool. There has to be a check and balance. There should be a whole community where people have to obey the rules and not have those connections in order to get the funding and the help. I believe there should be DNA testing before government funds should be given for children to force the men to support their children.
Well, there are measures in place in most of the provinces in Canada. Like in Alberta, if a man fails to support his child, his driver's license can be taken away. Now, what person wants to lose their driver's license? And things like that. But when it comes to these men in polygamy, I really do not know what loopholes they jump through. But let me tell you, they seem to know all of them.
Well, Nancy, the point is this. Kids like me that were raised on welfare, I was born for the purpose of being raised on welfare. Kids like me, there's no way to trace him back to our fathers because he didn't claim us. Even on Sister Wives, Robin says, I was born in polygamy, but my poor father couldn't claim me because of the attitude about our lifestyle. It's not the attitude. He doesn't claim you because of the legal responsibility of a father.
That's right.
So you have to have some legal connection to prove that that man legally is responsible for that child. I wish that they would enforce DNA testing wherever there's hot spots.
Well, they've done DNA testing in Bountiful ad nauseum. They know who belongs to who. And finally, a few years ago, I forget when it was, maybe 2008, Winston Blackmore started boldly signing the birth certificates as being the father of his children. Winston Blackmore, over the years, has flaunted his polygamy in our faces. When he had his own polygamy summit in 2004, when he interviews so openly on TV stations, tells facts that we know are not true, and, you know, talks about my ladies or my girls or whatever, to address a group of concubines as my means he looks at them only as chattel. And this is evident in the court trial now, going back to what you said. He seems to have problems with numbers, and they're catching him all the time. And it's wonderful to watch. I wish I could afford to go over to BC, to Vancouver, and just sit through one day of this trial, because I have never faced Winston Blackmore face to face. And I would love to do it just once. I would love to walk up there and say, hello, my name is Nancy Mereska.
I would love to be there with a camera.
Well, I'll tell you, I would just love to confront him once with the word, why? And for him to stand and say it's my religious belief, well, that's not good enough, because we have international agreements that we have signed and ratified in Canada that the United States has not. And the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women has been signed and ratified by Canada. Only 2 countries have signed that document and not ratified it. United States and Iran.
Whoa.
Yes.
Whoa.
How sickening is that?
Scary.
Do you remember, or were you still in FLDS in the mid-70s when they had the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, fight in the United States?
I remember hearing about that.
Okay. It was the Christian evangelists and the Mormons that put a kibosh on the ERA amendment in the United States. I believe if the ERA amendment had been passed, then CEDAW would have been ratified. But not only have they ratified CEDAW in Canada, they have implemented it, which means they have ingrained it into our laws. So in 2008, when there's a large Muslim contingency in Canada, and it's getting bigger and bigger with them allowing over 200,000 immigrants a year, and most of them are Muslim and Asian. In 2008, in the province of Ontario, they tried to push Sharia law into the marital statutes there. And I joined with hundreds of other women's groups, university groups, organizations from around the world to protest it. And Premier Dalton McGuinty, who is a very good premier, by the way, had to back away and say there will be no Sharia law in Ontario. And there is no Sharia law in any of the statutes, marital statutes in the provinces of Canada, the provinces and territories of Canada. 2 years ago, it's 2012 now, so yes, 2010, Britain started the process, and early last year, in the spring of last year, they do have Sharia law in their marital statutes. So this was sickening. A woman on my network said, I'm ashamed to say I'm from Britain, because Sharia law is similar to FLDS law when it comes to women. When women and children leave the FLDS, what do they leave with? The clothes on their back.
If they get out safe.
If they get out safe, if they're not pursued. Muslim women, it's a similar situation for them under Sharia law. It's a very terrible, terrible situation. And so I'm able to study both, compare both, and see the similarities, and it boils down to this: patriarchal rule.
Yes. Yes.
In all polygamy, it boils down to patriarchal rule.
It boils down to an extreme dual standard by the time they're through.
Exactly, exactly. But I have a program called Understanding Cult Gang Mentality and How to Avoid Entrapment. It's a very, very good overview of a cult or a gang, who gets the kudos, who gets the rewards, who gets everything. It's the same rules for a cult or for a gang. There's the few at the top that get everything, and there's all minions whose money goes to support these few at the top.
That's true. Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to Nancy Mereska, the power behind the website that crossed the world and made a difference in Canada's largest court case in history, called Stop Polygamy in Canada. Nancy Mereska, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.